what do you think is the definition of civil society?
Almost any organizational framework, almost any institutions in a society that are not government and not business, it would be probably a very good way to decide to define civil society. It would include NGOs, who are sometimes called development organizations. It would include voluntary agencies. It would include academia and the media for sure. Workers' unions, cooperatives, farmer and producer organizations, self-help group federations, street vendors. These are all ways in which people try to organize themselves to take care of their immediate needs and requirements which are not taken care of by government or by business. Governments have very legitimate and important roles to play. They are there, for one thing, to set up laws and regulations. They're there to set up the machinery for currency and monetary control. They're there for foreign affairs and defense. Lots and lots of important things to do. But they're not terribly good at doing things that require caring, that require empathy, that require really an understanding of people's needs. Businesses, on the other hand, by law actually, are supposed to maximize profits. Their job is not to do anything beyond that. And so the question of impact, as you call it, or doing something that is useful or valuable for society that's other than making profits, is actually against the law, if you look at it that way. And businesses are very good at following that part of the law because they find it very interesting to maximize revenues and minimize their costs. Civil society organizations are important, particularly in a democracy like India's. They are, as you said, watchdogs. They are, as you said, early warning mechanisms. They detect things that other people don't have time to because most of the formal institutions of government and business are actually living in their past. They're driving into the future through the rearview mirror, and for them, there is no need to change things. The status quo got them into a position where they're very happy to be in. And so there isn't anything more to it than that. The terminologies that bring all these organizations together, these development organizations, these voluntaries, these NGOs and so on, is complicated. I used to call them, at the time of the Rio conference when I was chairing the NGOs in 1992, the UN conference, Earth Summit, my favorite terminology was the independent sector, because it was independent of government and business. It stuck well, it worked, but it hasn't really had a long life. There were other ways to define this sector, but it seems to me that now the bulk of the people in the sector are quite comfortable with something like civil society organizations, civil society institutions. You could call it citizen sector, you could call it the people's sector, and each of those somehow have also other connotations. And civil society seems to have been generally acceptable. I wouldn't say everybody, it's not unanimous, but it's easier to talk in those terms. It's civil because it's civilian. It's civil because it's polite. It's good. It's civil in terms of its attitude towards people and nature and all the things around us. So civil's good. Now, we get in society, in the broader society, a lot of support from civil society, from NGOs and others, in areas that where governments and businesses originally are usually resistant, don't like to be pushed into. This includes, of course, environment, which is an entirely generated by civil society issue. Also health and public health and many things about education. Obviously, governments run and private companies run educational institutions, but a large part of what we consider important in life, women's issues, child welfare, care for the aged, respect for the disabled, uh, taking care of epidemics and like HIV and AIDS or leprosy, of improving people's literacy and skills. These are basically things that were generated by civil society. And I go further than that. Most of the things that we value in a democracy like ours, universal suffrage, gender equality, human rights, environmental health, safety of women, right to information, uh, the importance of social enterprise. None of these came from government. Not one of
Right.
these was something that the formal mechanisms would even encourage, let alone generate. These came from civil society. And the fact that we believe so much in things like human rights is something we had to fight for from governments, whether they were the colonial government or our own successors to the colonial governments. These were not easy to get. The right to information was a major fight with government. So civil society has a very, very important role to play in defining what is important for society and then making a case for it, lobbying for it, and advocating it, and sometimes fighting for it, sometimes even dying for it.